On this episode of the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast, we'll be talking about Prince's anti-drug manifesto, Purple Music. And joining me on this episode is Eloy Lasanta. Welcome back to the show, Eloy.
Hey, everybody! I'm always happy to be here.
Happy to have you, man. It's been a little bit. I actually checked. It's been like almost a year to the day. Not exactly a year to the day, but almost like a year to the week.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been a hot minute since you've been on the show. I think you were last on. We did something off Love Sexy, maybe Dance On.
Was Dance On? I was wondering if it was Dance On or new position, but I guess it was Dance On. You go in order, yeah. Yep. In the meantime, of course, you were on my channel, Prince's Friend, and you did what'd you do? Like a top 5 Prince songwriting techniques from all the stuff you've learned here on the podcast, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, plus I joined you on a live stream. We did
That's right, you did the March
Madness.
Yes.
Yep. So,
we're gonna do that again this year. That'll be fun.
Yeah, we've been still in touch and collaborating here and there whenever we can, even if you haven't been officially on my show since about a year ago. But hey, you're back. What I'm doing now is I took a step back. I'm doing vault tracks now from the 80s before I move on to the 90s, covering at the moment the 1999 Super Deluxe vault tracks, and that's where Purple Music comes in.
Yes.
Purple Music is one of those kind of epic songs in Prince's vault catalog, one of those widely bootlegged tracks that people knew for years, and was kind of a crummy, hissy sounding version that had been available to us for many years. And so the pristine version that we got on 2019's 1999 Super Deluxe was, a really great reason to buy the whole package. In my opinion, I mean, everything on there is great, but Purple Music, having a nice copy of this was something I had to have.
I think I even said that in my review. I was like Purple Music is worth the price of the whole thing. Because it's like, that's why when you were like, what song would you want to do off? And I'm like, Purple Music. Let's talk about Purple. I love that song. Mm-hmm. It's one of those, it's an amazing song because you described it as this like epic song, and yet it's kind of not that epic, and yet it's still pretty amazing and epic. It's weird because, it kind of is a beat with Prince, and he's got, a guitar, and he kind of scratches some guitar over it. So I think more, it's like the message of it is more epic, I think, than the actual musical elements of the song itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and also I think just the title, like the song Purple Music, it kind of summarizes in some ways Prince's aesthetic at the time.
Yeah.
He didn't always, keep the purple aesthetic throughout his career, but it was very prevalent here in the early to mid 80s. And we'll touch on that a little more. I definitely want to touch on that a little more, how purple became kind of, this is the time in his career where purple became synonymous with Prince.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons for it. And it's funny because a song like Purple Music was never officially released, but it could have been a title that would have potentially fit as the title for 1999, like replace 1999 and called his album Purple Music. That made sense. That would have made sense.
I think it would have. I feel like this song could have possibly been on the album, probably like in place of Let's Pretend We're Married. Like, I think that would be a really cool spot for it on the album. Or even like maybe instead of Lady Cab Driver, I think it would be dope there as well. There's a couple of songs that, if I was like forced, obviously, to replace one of them with Purple Music, I think those would be my two choices. Not that I don't love both of those songs with all my heart, especially Let's Pretend We're Married. Freaking love that song. But Purple Music, I think, I kind of wish, kind of like how everybody said about, oh gosh, no, oh gosh, what's the name of the other song now that was that became a big deal, but it was left off? Moonbeam Levels. Like like a lot of people were like, "Oh, Moonbeam Levels should have been on there," But it's weird because even with the songs that are on there, like in some countries, Prince still had to leave songs off.
Yeah, DMSR, right?
Yeah, DMSR
left
was
off.
left off in a bunch of places. So,
Yep.
it's like, we could have thrown on this one, instead of DMSR. I would fight to the death if anybody told me that DMSR was not the superior song. As much as I love Purple Music,
Yeah,
DMSR is still just that amazing.
yeah.
But if I'm gonna just have an empty slot there, you might as well put Purple Music there.
Well, and honestly, DMSR, Dance Music Sex Romance, also kind of fit as a manifesto for Prince at the time as well. This
Yeah,
one's more specific, like this is an anti-drug kind of song, where that one's just, hey, this is what I'm about. It's
yeah,
1982, this is what I'm about. I'm about dancing, about music, about having sex, and about romance. So,
yeah,
two very different themes, although they both kind of are the same in terms of him, Prince, putting out a message and like explaining what his music is about.
yeah.
In this song, Purple Music, as we'll go through the lyrics, it's very clearly, like I said in the intro, a very anti-drug message going on here. And Prince was, for all intents and purposes, very anti-drug throughout his entire
Mhm.
careers, as far as like what he put in his music. And another song that is cited as a very similar kind of theme to Purple Music that was officially released later in the 2000s is High. Prince gonna get
Yeah,
you high. So instead of
yeah,
like using drugs and alcohol to achieve a chemical high, Prince's music is supposed to, replace that,
yeah,
and provide the exact same experience to the user, but just through, his musical genius. You
yeah.
don't need all this other stuff. You've got my music,
I
and
think it's
that's
weird. I think it's weird to describe it 100% as like when I think anti-drug, I think like a PSA, and
mhm.
like I don't feel like this is necessarily Prince saying, "Hey, everybody, say no to drugs." I think it's just, I think it's more of like a personal statement, like of Prince saying, well, this is why I don't do drugs,
Yeah,
and if you listen to some of the stories that Morris would tell, Morris Day, especially in his book and some of the interviews, I mean, he's told stories about how when he was younger and hanging out with Prince and doing all that stuff, that they would go to these massive parties and all these people would be doing tons of drugs all around him, and he'd be like, "No, thank you." So it's like, so it's not even like Prince was saying everybody here has to stop doing drugs. But he was just like, hey, I'm not going to do it because I have music and that's enough.
yeah.
So yeah,
So yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It could be looked at as a more of an internal declaration as to why he doesn't need reefer or need cocaine, for example. But taking a step back, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping for those who may not know. Was recorded in May of 1982
hmm,
at his Kiowa Trail home studio in Chanhassen, Minnesota. As we mentioned, it was unreleased for decades, bootlegged for decades, before
hmm.
finally being released as part of the 1999 Super Deluxe edition, as one of the vault tracks, the many vault tracks that we got off of that collection.
Too many.
It's too many. Nah,
There was
never.
a lot of them though. It's like
Oh, I mean, Sign of the Times and more. That one almost gets too long
even
for
more. I
me.
know it's crazy.
So this is a very, Lynn LM1 drum machine heavy sounding track. Like it's drum machine beat, synthesizer, chicken scratch guitar. Prince adds a lot of like avant-garde sounds to it. At least that's how I describe it. It can be monotonous at times. I mean, it's almost 11 minutes long, and the beat stays pretty steady throughout. He changes enough musical aspects throughout the song to keep it interesting, I think, but it doesn't have a lot of ups and downs and a lot of musical changes, especially with the beat. That stays pretty steady throughout.
I would agree with that. I think that's part of what I mean when I say like there's no it's not a super epic song. Like if you take something like Planet Earth, where it starts off soft with the piano and then the drums come in and then there's a giant guitar solo at the end and then it's like he's screaming and it's amazing and it's like it swells and becomes this amazing epic thing. Whereas Purple Music kind of just starts one place, it ends mostly in the same place, but it does take you on a fun journey, but it's just I've said it in many of my reviews. I say it stays in its lane, essentially. Like it doesn't veer off, it doesn't go in crazy directions.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think it almost feels like experimental, like he was really just experimenting in a way that maybe if he had really truly felt like this was worthy of being included on 1999, he might have done something different. I mean, Automatic can sometimes be considered a bit too long and monotonous. I love Automatic. It's one of my personal favorites on the album, and that's why I love Purple Music. I don't mind like these really long, extended, experimental Prince songs that he will occasionally indulge in. And this fits in terms of the 1999. You think of how long most of the songs are on that album. 11 minutes is just like, yeah, that's just another song on the album.
Well,
it's no big deal.
Automatic was long because of the BDSM, the scene in it, like that part, like where he's being tortured.
Spoken word part, yeah.
Yeah, the spoken word. I mean, so that's why that one's long. There's like, for instance, I remember kind of going off topic, but like I remember when 1999 Deluxe came out and there was the extended Delirious, and I was listening to it and I'm like, oh, they cut it down. Like the released version was just the better edit of it because this is just a little bit more guitar and a little bit more here and a little bit more there, but it made it just longer, but not better. Like, but if there's length, but there's reason for the length, then I'm 100% okay with it. Don't just give me a song that's a long song because you wanted it, because it just needed to be longer.
Right. Yep. Interesting about Purple Music is that unlike a lot of Vault songs or songs that were never released, Prince started to incorporate this song a little bit into his live performances. Just a little bit, bit. I didn't know this, and I had to, this was just all from research that I did. So he apparently did a medley with All the Critics Love You in New York, which is a song that kind of is a spiritual brother, I guess, to this song. I think they kind of have similar aspects to it, and they're both a little bit experimental as well. But that was like at a after show, I believe, in 2010. He did that, and then he called it "Welcome to the Freedom Galaxy" when he was performing it during the Piano and a Microphone tour in 2016, where he changed the reefer and cocaine line to whiskey and champagne. So that's interesting. It makes you wonder, like, was he going to do a Extra Lovable kind of thing, pull this out of the vault, re-record it for another future project? It kind of makes you wonder if that was going on in his head at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I would have been down with it, but I mean, I think saying reefer and cocaine, I think is also fine because you're saying you don't want those things. So, I mean, I think that's fine. Those aren't dirty words,
No, yeah.
But I think it could have been interesting. I mean, but Prince always liked to change up the lyrics for live stuff, which I always love. I have a philosophy of if I go to your concert and it's exactly the same as on the album, then why am I here? So why am I here seeing you live? I'll just listen to the album if it's exactly the same. But that's just me, I guess. It's interesting because you said that like all the critics in New York is all the critics love you in New York. Excuse me before somebody pounces on me. When you said that song is kind of its spiritual brother, for me, I think it has a lot to do with the way that the beat starts when it comes in, where it goes. It reminds me more of Makeup, and the way that the beat for Makeup is, and I almost want to check. Actually, you know what? This was in May. I'm going to check out the date that Makeup was written, because I'm very curious to see if it was written around the same time and if he was like inspired by it.
You do that. While you're doing that, I'll just mention All the Critics Love You.
Yes.
Love You in New York was recorded in January of '82, and this was May. So obviously, All the Critics came first.
Yes.
But I just, just the way that he's performing this song, he kind of sings it in a kind of a monotone, almost robotic way. where he does something similar in All the Critics, like it's almost like a speak singing tone. So that's some of the reasons why I consider the two songs very similar. So what did you find about Makeup?
Makeup was originally recorded like just the basic tracking, it says in summer of 1981. And then he actually went into the studio with Vanity and Brenda in spring of 1982, which would be around the same time. They don't have an exact date on Prince Vault, but it says spring of 1982. So that means he pulled it back out of his songs that he had worked on the year before and was already messing around with it around the same time that he did Purple Music. So, maybe he was inspired by it. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you never know. But I do hear the same kind of stuttery beat in this song, at least how Purple Music starts, as you mentioned.
Right, at least how it starts,
Yeah, to what Makeup sounds like. All right, so Purple Music, again, as I kind of talked about already, and I kind of want to jump into it now, Purple being, becoming an important part of Prince's look and his overall aesthetic, as I mentioned. It kind of started with the Controversy album cover with that purple shoulder-studded trench coat that he was wearing. But there wasn't a lot of references yet in his music on Controversy, just more of the visual aspect of his trench coat. But now it's 1982, late 81, 82, and he's writing songs for what would become 1999 and even recording a bunch of tracks for other artists and some stuff that didn't end up anywhere, like Purple Music, for example.
Music.
And so we still have the trench coat because he still wore that in a lot of the promotional material and videos for 1999 songs. He's got the artwork for the 1999 album ultimately would be very purple focused. His Kiowa Trail home that he had recently purchased had it repainted purple. So, and now we've got, those are just like the visual parts of it. Now we've got, now we've got lyrics, we've got lines and songs. And just off the top, or just looking at some of the songs in 1999 where he mentions purple, songs that actually made the cut. Of course, the title track, The Sky Was All Purple, there were people running everywhere. You've got Automatic, You're the Purple Star, and The Night Supreme. All the Critics, Love You in New York, he mentions purple twice. Once he says Purple Love Amour. That's what we're fighting for. And then also, Fourth Day of November, We Need a Purple High.
Yes.
And then finally, the DMSR one, I like, that's my, besides The Sky's All Purple, which is iconic, but I like the DMSR line. Now you can all take a bite of my purple rock. That one's like one of my personal favorites. I love that one.
Well,
but
and
anyway,
considering the lyrics of Purple Music, that purple high that's needed in the other song could just be a reference to this song.
Yeah, purple high meaning like a high that isn't your typical chemical high. Yeah. It's the purple high. It's the Purple Music high. Absolutely. And so again, he wrote All the Critics, or recorded, I shouldn't say, I don't know when he wrote, but he recorded All the Critics first. So maybe he liked that line, Fourth Day of November, we need a purple high. He's like, a purple high. I wonder what I could do with that. Purple Music. Yeah, here we go. Let's try another avenue on this kind of same theme.
Yeah.
So anyway, lots of purple going on in Prince's catalog at this time, which is really kind of cool. It definitely fleshes it out, and of course it culminates then the following, or not the next year, but in 2 years with the release of Purple Rain, the movie and soundtrack, and then after that it's kind of like all over the map in terms of color. He's not so heavily focused on purple anymore, but for these 2 years, 1982 to 1984, it's very purple focused.
Very purple.
All right, so themes of this song, Eloy. The song is long, as I mentioned, a lot of lyrics, a lot of them repeat. So we'll touch on the kind of the important aspects of the song from a lyrical standpoint, but there's definitely themes going on here. We kind of already touched on, the metaphor of music being better than drugs, and Prince doesn't need drugs to get that high that he's looking for in life. What other themes have you kind of noticed when you listen to the song or read the lyrics?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is more of, Prince. I think this was around the time that Prince got the Lin M1. So this is also kind of a song about that self-discovery. He mentions, I just have to find a style of my own in the song a few different times. So, I don't need no cymbals, like I don't need a drum kit. I have my LM1. I don't need a saxophone because saxophones are, known for, the funky side of it. And he's just like, yeah, but I don't need a funky drum. I don't need a funky sax or a horn section or whatever. This was also around the time that he was doing a lot of like synthesizer horns. So he's like, if it's just me in my studio with a guitar and a drum machine and a keyboard, I'll do this myself. So and I don't need the drugs because I have this. Like this is where my life is, and obviously, I mean, drugs would actually be a deterrent. If you're taking a bunch of drugs, then you're going to be so high that you're not even going to be able to, sit down and do all of the hard work that is involved in making music the way that he did.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Like, I'm sure he looked at it not as a way to unlock his creativity, because he probably felt like I'm already pretty damn creative. I don't really need anything else to spark my creativity. If anything, it might make me less focused, make me maybe tired. I would have, with people who take drugs, there's an up and then there's a down, and the downside of that might take away his ability to create and focus and be productive, which he obviously was uber productive around this time, and not actually just around this time, his entire career. Yeah. So I can imagine him thinking like, laser focused Prince, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm doing. I don't really want anything to sidetrack me, especially not anything that I can control. And at this time of his life, he could definitely control whether or not he took drugs. I mean, obviously, women were maybe a vice that he wasn't quite so readily able to give up. But I think he also, if you talk to any of his girlfriends, they would tell you like, still music came first. 9 times out of 10 in our relationship, music came first. So he was very focused on the music, and Purple music was kind of like that, his way of saying like, this is what I do, man, and I don't really need anything else to really accomplish my goals.
Honestly, it's like the verses are 3 steps, right? One is anti-drug. The second part is the finding my own style and doing my own thing, and then the third part of that is the the lines that say like, some people can't understand just being inside a church doesn't make you a righteous man. You're high, so high. So it's interesting that then at that point he's also then pointing the finger at people who say that they believe in God, or that they're religious, or that they're spiritual, but they're really not, probably because you're just over there taking a bunch of drugs. You're not even actually doing the work. You're not actually praying, like I am. It's an interesting thing because he mentions that kind of redefines Purple music to almost be like every other innuendo that he does to God in lots of his other stuff, where there's, Purple music is what I do, is God, like all of these things. So that's because it's just interesting that he starts, it could just be anti-drug. It could just be, hey, check out my style, but then he throws God in there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one of the other themes that I saw as well is, so we've got the anti-drug message. You mentioned how like the lines don't need no cymbals, no saxophone, just need to find me a style of my own, is more or less him saying, I don't need all the normal trappings of musicianship. I mean, eventually he would decide he needed saxophone. Yeah. But as of in 1982, he's like, I don't need it. I can create the sound that I want using these tools, and it sounds great. Eventually he would say like, I'd like a live saxophonist, and I'd like him to participate in my live tours and yada yada. But in 1982 he was cool doing it himself.
Yeah, I feel like the word need does some work there. Like, I don't need a saxophone. Would I want a saxophone? Probably, yeah. But right now, I'm just recording in my house. It's like, I ain't got room for a saxophone player in here.
Yeah, a need versus a want, and
Yeah, exactly.
eventually he wanted one and he got one, but did he need one? No, he really
Yeah.
didn't.
Need?
Yeah, so he's already kind of talking about this style of his own, which would ultimately become the Minneapolis Sound or be defined as the Minneapolis Sound. He didn't call it that. Like, hey, I just created this thing called the Minneapolis Sound. It's it's just what people started to call it because he was creating like this army of music
Yeah.
that made it sound like he was like all these different groups were coming out of Minneapolis, and they all just happened to sound kind of similar. But the reality was Prince was behind all of them, or most of them for a while at least. But anyway, so yeah, the religion thing is the one that I also wanted to mention because you got the lines about this. Some people can't understand being inside a church don't make a righteous man. So he's seemingly pointing the finger at hypocrites who go to church and don't really understand God's teachings or understand what it is to be righteous or a good person even. Just being inside a church doesn't mean that you're on God's side or even on the right side of
Right.
good and bad. But then later in the song, it's funny because then he starts talking about these serpents and sacrificing, making, almost like it goes a little more paganistic in ways.
Yeah.
And it's funny because he never really did. I'm trying to think of examples where he kind of took that path or that avenue lyrically. It's usually he stays on the righteous path when he's talking about God, and to kind of delve a little bit into the darker sides of paganism or the occult or whatever you want to call it, even if it's
Yeah.
just alluding to it, is interesting and kind of fascinating to me.
I feel like the serpent, because if we follow his religion of, Christianity, the serpent is the devil. And I think sacrifice, I think when we think of it in religious terms, we think of sacrifice like sacrificing a goat to something. But I think it's more of, this is my thought. I think that he's saying it's sacrificing just how good that drug will probably make me feel. Like I'm taking the harder road by saying no to the drugs. And, because he specifically calls out the serpent to sacrifice and all that stuff. But the whole point is if you sacrifice it, then you get to quote unquote purple paradise, which is the next line. So he's like, I don't need that. I'm going to forego, the drugs that the devil is making you all take. But and instead, I'm going to, follow God's word and just make this music in my own style and make my mark on the world. So yeah, so I mean, but I hear what you're saying too with the kind of paganistic, sacrificing the serpent. But I think it's not indulging, I guess, would be the layman's way of saying that. He's a songwriter, so he's using fancy words.
Yeah, and ultimately he says we'll make a wish and we'll kiss in purple paradise. So I always took purple paradise to be just another way of describing heaven, or something along those lines.
That's usually what anytime there's something heaven or paradise, utopia, anything that he mentions, I just go, oh yeah, it's heaven.
Yeah, basically. And then in a verse earlier, just a couple verses before, he brings up another theme in this song, and that's death and potentially the end of the world. In time we all die, all music gone. So we better try our best to get along and get high. So again, like death is a theme that he is exploring, especially on the title track to the album that this might have been on,
right.
But also at the end of Let's Pretend We're Married, you and I know we're going to die someday. You think I'm crazy, you're probably right, et cetera, et cetera. So he's bringing up, mortality and how he knows and he recognizes he's mortal, you're mortal, we're all mortal, we're all going to die. But to say like we're all going to die, all music gone, that almost tells me a little bit more like not just we're going to die and life will go on without us because life always does, but this could just be all, we're getting towards the end of humanity as we know it on this planet, which obviously is a theme that is explored on the title track 1999 with, the apocalypse, have him bringing that up in the title track. So I just wonder, like, this is just another example of a theme that he was fleshing out in his head. It was really something that he wanted to talk about. And another song that you had mentioned earlier, Moonbeam Levels, speaks to that as well. So also written around the same time and recorded around the same time. So this is heavy, weighing heavy on his head. His brain.
I think the fact that this song kind of bounces around to a bunch of different things is an example of like the experimental nature of it that we kind of touched on earlier. Like this is a song where you can tell that he's like, let's try this out and see what it sounds like. And not necessarily, I think that's why this song was maybe never really put on anything, because it's almost not even its own song. It's like a smattering of a bunch of different songs, like lyrically, obviously it's one beat and, whatever all the way through. But it's almost like there's not one cohesive message or theme or subject matter. It's kind of just a bunch of different stuff thrown together because he was just kind of jamming is what it sounds like to me. But then, of course, then that brings me to, one of the other things that I love is where he says, every subject, any key, purple music can't be judged. It just happens naturally. Ain't it all right? And I'm like, yeah, I kind of like that, because he's like, whatever, I'll write a song about anything. Give me a key. This is just flowing out of me. And I feel like that's where probably a lot of these lyrics came from. And he probably had a couple of ideas and then just kind of riffed, which is why some of the lyrics are like repeated, here and there. He's trying and playing with the phrasing and different ways to say it, just to see if it works. And because that's what I love about this song is it's him like in the process of creating, is how I feel about this song.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot because it does kind of give off that vibe of I'm just kind of riffing, almost like it's an ad lib or something that he just sat down and started writing, and whatever, like free flowing, top of the brain type of lyrics. Like this is what's going on in my head right now, and who knows? Maybe he spent a lot of time on these lyrics. I don't know, obviously, but maybe not. Maybe these were just, exactly what he was thinking at the time, and he just made it fit, made it work. And
for me, this song sounds directed. Like it doesn't sound like he's just singing about a thing. It sounds like probably the day before or even earlier that same day he was being pressured. Like it sounds like, look, I don't need these things, I'm good. Not like generally like I don't need drugs. It's more like almost like, hey, this is a song to Trevor from last night. Like, hey, I don't need your stuff and you're faking and you're acting like you're righteous but you're not. That sort of thing. And so to me, it sounds very pointed, like it's a reactionary song.
Yeah, I can see that. Or even reactionary
Trevor's
to
out there.
Trevor.
It was just the first name that came to my head.
Jeff.
Oh, darn Jeff.
Always trying to push Prince into doing things he doesn't want to do. So the verse that you were talking about, every subject, any key, purple music can't be judged, it happens naturally. There's another verse, whatever you want to call it, that's similar, I think, in theme. Ain't got no theory, ain't got no rules. I just let the purple music tell my body what to do. It's basically kind of the same thing as what you just talked about. Prince is the rule breaker. He's kind of painting himself here as the rule breaker, which, in all essence, he was for the most part. I mean, he was breaking rules left and right in terms of what was a musician supposed to do. Was an 18-year-old supposed to produce their own debut album? No. Was a musician supposed to essentially record every instrument on their album without needing outside help? No, that's not what you're supposed to do.
That's supposed to, yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, I mean, and specifically for me, as a musician myself, the ain't got no theory, like I interpret that as music theory, right?
Yeah.
So he's saying like, and as a musician, music theory is a guidance, it's a guiding tool. But you absolutely should step out of that if it makes the song better. And I think that's part of it, right? Is like if you there are a lot of people who I know who stick like, oh well, that song's not in key, we can't, or that note's not in the key, so we need to change it. It's just like I don't know, I like it better. Like let's just go with it.
Right.
So I like not needing to do that. And I've written songs sticking straight to a key, and I've written songs where I just grab my bass and I just play and hopefully it sounds good. And I discover later on, I'll be like, oh, this is kind of in this other key, but then there's a bunch of notes that don't actually fit, but then they fit the song, not necessarily the music theory. But, I love the idea that, again, and I think it goes back to the religious aspect of it, and how purple music could technically be, God. The fact that he's saying like I just pick up an instrument and I just play, it flows through me. And later on in interviews he would say like I do it for God, and God is the one who gifted me with this and whatnot. So this is maybe an early iteration of that idea put to song.
Yeah. Certainly could be. Maybe he didn't even realize at the time that that's what he was saying explicitly, but certainly it
Right.
could be interpreted that way, the way it's phrased. Purple music just happens naturally,
Yeah.
and yes, the talent is there, so he can just rely on his talent to take him where he needed to go musically, but also, having a higher power sort of help him and guide him where he needed to go or where he should go musically was something I think he was definitely grasping at this time. Religion is certainly an aspect that is being integrated more explicitly into his songs during 1999 and then would, continue on throughout his career after that. Prior to 1999, with the exception of the Lord's Prayer and Controversy, there's not a lot of religion in Prince's music that you can, explicitly cite.
Yeah.
Now he's feeling more comfortable, maybe, or feeling like this is a uh, something about his upbringing or about his personality that he felt is important to share with the rest of the world in a way that he didn't feel was important before. I like the next page. Don't want reaction. I just want the act. So I've got a theory, potential theory of what he means there, or just a way to interpret that line or those grouping of lines. Don't want reaction. I just want the act. It's easier to give love than it is to give it back. What do you think about those lines, Eloy? Do you have any really interesting thoughts on that, or no?
Well, for me, I interpret that as probably the people who he's dealing with are, again, I find this song to be very like a reaction song.
Yeah,
And probably somebody said, hey, if you just get high, you're gonna write your songs are gonna be so much more, right? And he was probably like, I don't need that to write my song. So I don't want the reaction, which would be the chemical reaction of the drugs in his body. He just wants the act of just making the damn music. It's like, I don't need that. I just want to do the thing. Because there's probably people out there, and I actually know a couple, who like can't write a song unless they're high. Like they literally cannot come up with stuff, and the drugs almost, take over at that point. It's easier to give love than to give it back. Not really sure how that fits into everything. I think it's a fun line, but
yeah.
I actually don't know how that connects to the I don't want reaction, I just want an act. And it could be because of the way that I'm interpreting, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
No, and I felt they were a bit disconnected as well, because even though
Yeah.
I didn't think of chemical reaction the way you did, which is cool. I'm glad you did, because that's an interesting interpretation. What I was thinking more was going back to how this song, to me again, and I have no idea if Prince would have agree, has a lot of similarities to All the Critics Love You in New York. So I was thinking reaction, meaning like, I don't need you to tell me if my music's good. Critics, I don't really, because that song, All the Critics Love You in New York, is very tongue in cheek. And hey, if you wear these clothes and if you say this thing and you act this way, you can become a critical darling. And apparently, I've jumped on the right side of the critics here in 1981, 82. But he's also kind of like, but who cares, right? I mean, does it really matter? It shouldn't matter what the critics say.
Your interpretation, I think, actually does contextualize the next line. So, because what he's saying is it's easier to give love, meaning, make the music and share the love than it is to get it back. So he's saying, I don't want to read the reviews, the reaction, the reviews. I don't need to hear if people like it. Because it's easier to just make the music than it is to expect people to like it in return and to give that love back to you. So actually, my interpretation, while valid, is probably wrong. Yours seems to be yours actually makes the next line make sense.
Okay, sure. Sure.
Mine, it's like, I don't know. It doesn't really make sense if you take my interpretation of it. So I would probably go with yours. That makes a lot more sense.
Okay, but I do like the chemical reaction because I think that's clever, if that's what he was thinking. I don't want reaction or chemical
double
reaction.
Entendre. Double entendre.
It was clever if that's what he was thinking. And,
yes.
Like a lot of Prince songs, it can have multiple meanings. So who's
100%.
to say, right? And he keeps saying like he's high, and throughout the song, I'm so high, I'm high.
Yeah.
And of course, he's referring to his purple high that
right.
he's on in the moment of writing the song, recording the song, performing the song. He's on a musical high that he's just, wants to share with everybody. And again, if you interpret it to be an anti-drug message, meaning like, y'all don't need drugs, just listen to my music, or an anti-drug message meaning like, I don't need drugs to make great music. I don't need drugs to be as creative as I possibly can be. I think it works either way.
Yeah, I can see that. Thank you for telling me that I'm at least partially correct.
There is no wrong answers on this show, Lloyd.
Kind of true.
Okay, so only ever way that there could be a wrong answer on this show, in my opinion, is if somebody who was with Prince when he wrote the song can vouch for a different interpretation. Like, no, you guys are fucking idiots. And that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, when I do occasionally do like song breakdowns on my channel, and I love because I'll quote Prince in the damn video, and people will come after the fact and in the comments and be like, well, actually, it's about this. And I'm like, Prince said it's about that. Why are you going to say you know better than the person who wrote the damn song?
But even if he didn't say that, there's no way that anybody besides Prince knows exactly what these songs mean.
Of course.
So nobody should ever say, in my opinion, this song is, about this, end of story, period. Anyway.
Although what we've also heard is that Prince loved to mess with people, and Prince loved to tell different people different things. So even if that person says, well, no, I was there and Prince told me it's about that, it could be, if you ask somebody else who was also in the room, he probably told them something completely different. So.
Yeah, like a half an hour later, he told somebody else a different explanation of what the song is.
Actually, this song is about going to the zoo. So, like, I don't know why you guys are getting anti-drug out of this.
Yeah, well, where'd you get that? So later in the song, he has some interesting, I don't know if they're ad-libs again or just kind of funny little quirky lines. If you can understand my color, put your hand in your crotch. Okay, I don't think that there's a lot of deeper meaning there other than Prince was a horn dog and he liked to sprinkle in some, I wouldn't say there's nothing explicit here, but certainly there's references to sex.
Now, see, I took that line as back in the day, and probably now, but brothers used to walk with their hand kind of on the junk.
Oh, okay.
A lot of the time. So basically, like, if you're black, let's jam is basically how I interpret that. But I could see that going in another direction and being more sexual if you wanted to interpret it that way as well.
Yeah, again, multiple meanings potentially. And of course, I'm coming at it from a different angle than you. So
Of course.
certainly, and if a woman might think of it in a different way as well than a man. So you just never know what, kind of interpretation is ultimately going to be gleaned from a line like,
Oh yeah.
understand my color, put your hand in your crotch. I don't know. I mean, it could go so many different
It
ways,
is
man.
very vague, in fairness.
Very vague, yes. Let's see what else. Oh, then we have the kind of, I don't know what to call this part of the song, but you've got the kind of the spoken word section where Prince takes on the persona of, I guess, a butler or
Yeah.
somebody who is like a
It's
servant.
I think they're referred to as skits.
Skits. Oh,
Yeah.
like this section of the song. I thought you were talking about the
Right.
person. I'm like, I never heard a person who
Oh no.
gives a bath to somebody is called a skit before.
No, it's not really singing and it's not, it's not a song part. It's like, oh, we're gonna add in like a little skit here, like a little comedy thing.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean, it's weird because, it's time for your morning bath. What would you like to bathe in today? With all due respect, I think that it might, oh no, I don't want to play anymore. And I'm like, I honestly have no clue. It's like, what are you saying you want to bathe in? I don't know. It could literally be anything because it's not in the song. It's like you're supposed to put it in your, fill in the gap with your own thoughts there.
yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that aspect that you only hear one side of the conversation, or even,
Yeah.
the one side of this interaction between the person, the sir who's getting the bath, and the person who's kind of administering the bath or suggesting the bath, however you want to call it. I like that we only get one side of it because it does. First of all, it's kind of a cool, creative way of inserting the skit into the song
Mm-hmm.
instead of Prince trying to take on two different vocal duties and doing one voice here and then as the response another voice, because he could have done that. He could have done like a sped up voice or slowed down voice, or even if he wanted to bring somebody else in to do it with him, but just to give us one side of it, that leaves it very open to interpretation. It leaves it kind of vague, kind of vague, very vague, and it lets your mind wander. Like, what did he say? What is so
Yeah.
like? What could he have said that was so appalling or offensive or disturbing? Maybe disturbing is the best word to use here.
It would have to be something really disturbing. Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh no, I don't want to play any. Well, first of all, play what? So I don't know what they were trying to play, but I think it's just kind of a weird little skit that I enjoy listening to
Yeah.
because it just fits in with the song being kind of, like I said, avant-garde a little bit, where it's not trying to appeal to any kind of masses with the song. It's too long, it's too repetitive, and it's too weird. It's too all of those things to have any kind of mass appeal to it.
And those are my favorite kinds of songs.
Me
like
too.
from any artist. Like I don't want to hear the song that I've heard a billion times. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and we were talking about the Foo Fighters, and they were talking about how much they love like My Hero and Everlong, and I'm like, oh, I mean those songs are good, but I'd listen to almost every other song on the album before I'd listen to those. Like because they have, I guess they have too much mass appeal. Like that's not where I go. It's why I like a lot of Prince's music in later years, whereas other Prince people in the community gave up on him because it wasn't for the mass appeal. Prince was just making what he felt like making. I that's what I'm in. I'm in for the experience and not for something that is I don't know, popular.
Yeah, there's nothing in the song that I would cite as being popular in terms of like how it's structured,
Right.
how it's delivered, in anything about like this could have been like if Prince decided to be an underground artist or decided he wanted to just forego the mainstream and just do his thing, be like another Gary Newman or another underground artist that was making very electronic heavy music. but
Mm-hmm.
also very insular. Like I can do everything. I don't need a lot of help. What I'm super creative and I can do whatever I want, but I don't need a lot of other assistance. And what you're going to get from me is 100% my vision. He could have done songs like this and other songs even off of that made the 1999 album.
Yeah.
Something in the Water is a strange song, but I love it. All the Critics Love You in New York is a strange song, but I love it.
Yeah.
Automatic goes and it's basically like an epic movie practically, like put into music, and I love it. If it wasn't for those singles off of 1999, that album is very progressive. It's very unique in how it's created. Like you're expecting a lot of Little Red Corvettes in 1999s. Well, wait till you get to side C and side D. If you've got the vinyl, you've got that whole second album is filled with really unique and creative songs that forego any kind of popular structure,
I would
popular
agree with
music
that.
structure.
Yeah, I feel like Prince kind of front loaded the 1999 album with the more radio stuff, like the more kind of like, and then obviously after that, he's just like, now I'm going to go in a completely different direction. So let's go. Because the first three songs are 1999 Little Red Corvette Delirious. Like, come on, like those, and all of those are bangers, and all of those were singles, and all of those were really good singles. But those three, if you compare those three songs to say the last three songs on the album, they are polar opposites in terms of mass appeal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like Lady Cab Driver, I can barely play that song in front of my kids because that whole section where he's fucking the shit out of Jill Jones, I can't do it. I just can't do it. Sorry,
well, I mean,
kids.
yeah. So like the last three, yeah, because the last three songs are Lady Cab Driver, All the Critics Love You in New York, and International Lover. Like, yeah, like pretty much, three songs that are very different from 1999 Little Red Corvette and Delirious.
Very, very different.
So I mean, 1999 is an amazing album. I still give kudos to that album. Like it's really, really, really well constructed, as you said.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. And Purple Music was, like a centerpiece, not literally the centerpiece, but similar or close to the centerpiece of the vault tracks that we got. Yeah. And it's a song that, again, people were aware of prior to 2019, so it's not like this was a out of nowhere left field banger that we got. It was a song that we all pretty much expected to be on the collection. Yeah. And when it showed up there, we were excited to have an officially released version. I if I had to pick like one or two songs off of the vault tracks from 1999 Super Deluxe to like share with other people, I would definitely pick Purple Music because I do really think it's a strong song with a lot going for it in spite of or because of its runtime. I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that, but again, I don't mind the long runtime.
Yeah, I'm fine with it as well. I mean, I would say Purple Music definitely. Rearrange is another one of those really cool ones, and I feel like Rearrange and Purple Music are kin to each other. They have similar feels to me. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it has a lot going on the 1999 Super Deluxe, though.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess we've pretty much come to the end of the song in terms of like talking about everything that it has to offer, which is a lot. The song has a lot to offer lyrically. And again, a lot of repetitive uses of what we call the chorus. Don't need no reefer, don't need a cocaine. Purple Music does the same to my brain. That's repeated throughout. So it's kind of like if you had to pull or extract any lines out of the song that kind of summarize it, that would be the closest summary I could think of to kind of explain what Purple
I'd say
Music
that counts as the chorus. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of songs start with the chorus. Or you could technically say, and I'm high so high is the chorus. Or I guess that's more of a refrain than anything. Or the song doesn't have a chorus, and that's fine too.
Yep. Yep. I mean, again, Prince was a rule breaker, and he was definitely aware of the fact that he wasn't quite following the path that everybody else was following from a musical standpoint. And
Exactly. Yeah, it seems almost weird to try and categorize this because it's like it's a song about not following the rules. So trying to apply the rules to it, we probably shouldn't do that now that I'm thinking about it. So, there is no chorus, there is no verse, there's nothing. It's just a song and it's awesome and it doesn't follow any rules. So
it's purple music, and that's all it needs to be.
Music. Exactly.
All right, Eloy. Well, thank you so much for being on the show to talk about purple music. Now
Thank
is
you
the
for
chance.
having me.
Of course, I'm glad that you chose this song because, again, I wanted somebody who was still passionate about the song, and
Oh, yeah.
I could sense it coming out of your voice. You love the song as much as I do, man, and that's great.
I really do.
So why don't you tell the folks listening what you're up to and where people can find you?
Sure. You can definitely check me out on the Princess Friend YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and type in Princess Friend. We're actually back from a hiatus in 2022, but now with 2023, we're back strong and we're starting to put out a bunch more videos. So be tuned for that. If you want to follow any of my music that I make, the name of my band is Strays of the World. We just released our new single, Like Glass, yesterday. And I guess I don't know whatever day this comes out, but
in January, you released it in January of 2020.
In January, let's say that. but yeah, you can check that out, straysoftheworldmusic.com, or just type in Strays of the World into your favorite music platform, and you can check out the music that we're making. We have tons of it and tons more coming, because Prince is the person that I look up to musically. So don't need no reefer, don't need cocaine.
Got it. Well, thank you so much again. This has been the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast. I've been your host, Jason Brenninger. You can find the show at pressrewind.net. I'm also back on Facebook and Instagram after a brief hiatus. I was kicked off of those platforms thanks to a hacker. But I'm back, so I got to rebuild the following that I had there. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I thought I was following the Press Rewind podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Well, you were, but you need to follow it again because it's gone. The old stuff is gone. So please find me and follow if you are on those platforms. Still on Twitter and on YouTube. So check it out. And until next time, thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.